a jointly hosted conference
네.
between the University of Southampton and the Education University of Hong Kong, particularly the Quantitative Methods in Education Group here in Southampton and the Analytics Assessment Research Centre in Hong Kong, the Education University Hong Kong. Please note, as per the robot voice that you all no doubt heard, this flash conference is being video recorded, and this is to enable attendees to revisit the content at a later
啊，
date.
一撳走就走啲。我呢個係知啊，但係呢個我想寫咩？話正氣咩部？
Folks may want to mute their microphones. So again, a warm welcome. The hosts of today's talk are myself. My name is James Hall. I am an associate professor of psychology of education at Southampton. My colleague Tahi Choi, she's associate professor of education and director of internationalization, and Ming Chu, who is chair professor of analytics and diversity. We're very pleased to welcome Mr. Matt Perks, who's a senior teaching fellow in Southampton, and Ben Davis as well, who's Dr. Ben Davis, who's a lecturer in education in our school, and to whiz you through in 1 hour all you need to know regarding AI and university assessment. That may be an overbold claim, but hopefully it should get you started on thinking about some of the broad issues in this area, meeting with other people, and getting started towards potential collaborations. Of course, none of this would be possible without our lovely technical team who have been instrumental in setting this up from the Education University, who are Kelly Choi and Si Ming Lin. So thank you hugely to them for all they've done. This would not be possible without them. So again, the aims are today are twofold. One, to provide a forum for discussion of a topic in higher education that is rapidly growing, is experienced globally, and which impacts nearly all disciplines, inside and outside education, and to encourage new institutional collaborations between our two universities. I have sent these slides to our lovely technical team for circulation afterwards, along with the recording, and there are embedded links to key individuals and to the different research groups as well. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to follow up. Here is our timetable for this morning. You'll see we're right at the top. We're having a very nice little welcome. And after this, we'll hand over to the dean of each of our universities to talk about what today represents in terms of the topic area and as an opportunity to engage with others going forward. We'll then move through the three talks one by one. Then we'll pool participants into breakout rooms of 2 or 3 people, and that will be for brainstorming questions that might be asked during the following open discussion. After that period of time, we'll come back together as a big group and we'll ask folks to submit their questions using the question and answer function in Zoom. Towards the end, we'll summarize some themes from that discussion, we'll talk about them, and we will give you some opportunities for exploring follow-ups afterwards. With that said, I'm keeping pretty good time, so I may hand over now, if that's all right, to the Associate Dean International in the Faculty of Social Sciences here at Southampton, which is Dr. Harris Saras. Harris, are you there?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, James, for this kind introduction. I'm here in my capacity as Associate Dean for Internationalization and the Faculty of Social Sciences of the University of Southampton. And I would like to welcome you all to what promises to be a very exciting conference. And I would like also to congratulate colleagues from Southampton, but also fellow academics from Education University Hong Kong for their synergy on this matter that produced what you will have the opportunity to enjoy and engage with today. Very briefly, I would just like to highlight that the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Southampton encompasses a number of schools. One of them is the School of Education, which co-organizes this conference, but we also have the School of Economic, Political and Social Sciences, the School of Law, the School of Business, and oddly enough, perhaps the School of Mathematics. So as the names of the schools indicate we very much encourage interdisciplinary research, and we see social sciences best served by research that is intended to generate impact and drive social change. And I think this introduction is highly relevant to this conference because it is an interdisciplinary conference bringing together education, AI research, and obviously assessment methods that are of interest to all academics. But it is also highly timely if we consider how significant the change that AI is expected to bring to our lives has been, and as significant has been discussed over the year. So I think it is time for me to stop and reiterate my warmest welcome to you all and my congratulations to all colleagues who are involved in this activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harris. Lovely, lovely words. And I echo the entire sentiment of all of the sentiments of that. Bruce, could I now hand over to you? It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, hi, James. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So yes, it's great to see this event taking place. It's a good collaboration between the two research centres. And also it's a further collaboration between our two universities because we already have a great collaboration between the School of Education, Education Policy Leadership Department, and your Southampton Education School in terms of looking at research quality and comparing REF and RAE criteria, which of course match in the UK and Hong Kong. So there's a great peer review partnership taking place really as well. But this topic is so fascinating to me, not because I know anything at all about AI, but because I'm a sociologist of higher education. So I well remember an influential book called Folk Devils and Moral Panics by Stanley Cohen, published in 1972. This book actually talked about youth subcultures and how often there's a moral panic around what is seen to be a threat to society. So one of the things that discussion about this topic reminds me of, the moral panic we had around maths in the 1970s and 80s when people started to use pocket calculators in schools. People said it would destroy mathematics as we knew it. And then moving into the 1990s and 2000s with the internet, of course, we were told, I remember people used to say the students weren't allowed to use the internet to do their research. So one of my kind of challenges for the speakers today is this yet another moral panic, which actually deserves less attention than we are actually giving it. So it's a little bit of a challenging question, but I'm really fascinated to hear what they've got to say. So looking forward to your contributions from Matt and from Ming and from Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Also, thank you both to Bruce and Harris for keeping to time so tightly. With that then, Matt, I may hand over to you to get us started with our first talk.
Thank you
so much.
I'm just sharing my screen.
Yep, it's working really well.
And well, it would be if I wasn't so candid. There we go. Right. I'm Matt Perks, and I'm an academic conduct officer in the Education School at the University of Southampton. So my role there is to maintain assessment integrity when we are conducting student assessment. In 5 minutes, I'll try, I want to talk about assessment integrity issues as I'm experiencing them. So to start with, here are 2 pieces of writing. I'm not expecting you to read them whilst I'm talking, but the one on the left was written by a human, the one on the right by Cheat-GPT. And I think if you took some time, you would probably get a first impression that the Cheat-GPT version is better. But in fact, it tries to balance 2 sides of an argument about learning styles, whereas the best evidence is presented by the human on the left. The quality of written English is better from the Cheat-GPT version, but the quality of understanding is better from the human. And that and other evidence and experiences leads me to raise three questions for my little talk today. First question is can generative AI produce content that will pass university assessments without students using it having much understanding? Secondly, are many students doing this? And thirdly, on a slightly different tack, why would we expect students to submit poor work or relatively poor writing in particular when generative AI could help them to improve it? So I guess everybody needs to think a little bit about what the answers are to those questions in their context. My answers in my context are yes, generative AI can produce content that will pass university assessments without the student understanding very much about what is being presented. I have absolutely no idea whether many students are doing this or not. And I think it's a really good question about why would we prevent students from using a tool that is generally available. Okay, so I want to try and look at those questions in a little bit more detail. So looking at question one in more depth, what's the evidence that a student can use generative AI to pass assignments without much knowledge or understanding? There isn't a huge amount of evidence, but it is starting to be generated. The top reference here is a study which hasn't been published yet, but some internal work here at the University of Southampton, in which a PhD student, but from electronics and computer science, was tasked with trying to produce content to pass some master's level assignments in education and one or two other assessment items. They were able to get something like 80% pass rate at master's level without any real understanding of the field. Cheat-GPT is a sort of online essay mill using Cheat-GPT, of course. And last year they were offering as a kind of introductory offer whole free assignments during the month of November or something like that. So I thought that was worth some investigation. I ran some of the BSc Year 1 assignments through that. So simply providing the assignment brief and giving an idea of how long it needed to be. And the majority of assignments that were returned were at about 2-2 level. Scarf et al. At a university in the south of England were submitting AI-generated exam answers alongside the genuine student answers for marking. And they found that the generative AI wasn't able to do better than the best students, but it did outperform the student average. And the final reference there is to somebody who's investigated using ChatGPT-3 to attempt MBA assignments at Wharton School in the USA. And their conclusion was, yes, ChatGPT-3 could get an MBA from Wharton. There's a number of other pieces of evidence around that seem to point in the same direction. One final study, again, internal work here at the University of Southampton. This is in the Faculty of Physical Sciences, so very different types of assignments from the ones that we use in education. In this chart on the left, part 1, 2, 3, 4 is years 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth year of an integrated master's where that's relevant. And the low and the high refers to interns using generative AI, either with a low amount of kind of editing or a high amount, which means that they read them, did they make some kind of sense, a little bit of tidying up, but no significant changes to the content. And you can see that it makes a difference how much human input there was, but 40% there is the pass mark, 50% is a 2-2, 60% is a 2-1. So in the majority of cases with a small amount of work, students were able to get at least 2-2 across all 4 years of those programs that were involved. So I think there's a fairly convincing amount of evidence that the answer to question 1 is yes. So what about question 2, which was how many students are doing this? And I genuinely do not know. Where are we at the moment? Well, I don't know whether you've seen the film Stepford Wives, but it's about a small town where all the wives are perfect housewives, but lack personality. And at the end, it turns out they're all robots. I think generative AI writing is like that. Stepford Wives writing, if you like, no personality, too perfect. I think we are seeing this in assignments, but it's very hard to be sure whether it's just from using tools like Grammarly and international students writing in their own language and then translating using DeepL or other translation tools which are producing increasingly perfect English. Or is it that the actual content is being produced by Cheat-GPT or a similar tool, and we're seeing that in the nature of the writing? I think we desperately need good quality research on this question. And finally, question 3. Here's that piece of human writing on learning styles again on the left. And here is what you get if you ask Cheat-GPT to keep the same ideas but improve the writing. Grammarly Pro can do this even better. Why would we insist that a student who struggles with writing inaccurate English still has to submit the poor quality written English when they can now easily fix it and will be needing to do so in every professional piece of writing they do in the future? So it's a question we're struggling to answer, I think, here at this university, and I imagine everywhere else as well. So to end, my view is we need to end up in one of 3 positions if we're going to maintain academic integrity in our assessments. And I present them here. So position 1 is if we're certain most students are trying to use generative AI only in appropriate ways, in which case the answer to question 1 becomes no. And we're therefore happy with our assessment integrity. Second position is that the design of assessment means generative AI isn't going to help very much. In which case, sorry, I think I've got my questions the wrong way around. I think if we're in the first position, the answer to question 2 becomes that we know that not many students are using generative AI in ways we're not happy with. If we can design the assessment so generative AI isn't going to help very much, then we've cracked question 1. But I think at the moment, in-person exams, oral assessments are the only 2 ways in which we can be sure that we're doing that. I think most of the work on particular types of assessment actually shows that generative AI is pretty good at any type of kind of coursework type assignment. And finally, we could be in a position where we say that students can use all the generative AI tools at their disposal, but somehow the expected standard and the learning objectives take that into account. But I'm not convinced that we're going to be in a position where students who we would want to pass our courses, even if they're not exceptional, are actually able to outperform generative AI. And therefore, I think we've got a substantial problem. Thank you for listening, and I hope that was useful.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was absolutely fascinating. I found myself nodding along, and I'm really, really grateful to you. That's a wonderful overview of where the current issues are, both as they're being experienced in university assessment, university teaching, but also where research is right now. And the fact that you are drawing on research that has even yet to be submitted and published to try and speaks to the speed of change here, and that when that's coupled with the universality of this issue, it really does put into context so much of what we're here to talk about today. So thank you very much again. Keep an eye on the time. I think it's probably time to move on to our next speaker. So Ben, can I hand over to you?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, James. Let me just check that my screen share is working, if I can get a thumbs up or a...
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone who's helped put this together. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I am going to try in 5 minutes to talk about 2 active research projects, an extremely ambitious goal, but bear with me. So my name is Ben Davies. I'm a math education researcher in the School of Education here in Southampton. The 2 projects I'm going to speak about are both related to mathematics, but only in tangential ways. I'm going to try and draw out here should be, or at least my intention is they're relevant to everyone. So if you see the word mathematics in any place that you feel that may or may not be relevant to you, please feel free to substitute your chosen discipline, or perhaps even a more general conversation about education at large. So my first project, I'm going to slightly subvert the premise of the meeting today, insofar as this is talking about developing a research agenda, as I say, for us, for undergraduate education and mathematics, but we can think about this more generally. Here's our lovely team. 4 of us are based in the UK. Yuso, for another couple of weeks, will be at the University of Hong Kong, just down the road from many of us on the call. But he's in fact moving to Melbourne in the next few weeks, so you will lose him very soon. We used a Delphi study here, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. But so our goal here was trying to understand what are the big questions and what is currently happening in the space. So as Matt has already highlighted, there's a lot of what we framed as early work happening in the sort of generative AI space. Lots of here's what's happening in my classroom, or here's what I observe in this particular context. All of it useful, all of it interesting, all of it laying a really interesting foundation for what might come next. Not a lot of it looking at big picture questions, at least as in our observation, and not a lot of it being particularly systematic when it comes to connecting to educational theory and connecting to the wider history of scholarship in our discipline. So that led us to this idea of trying to generate a consolidated community-led research agenda where we can think about what are the big questions and how are we going to answer them. Some similar stuff has happened in my world. I was involved in a project around computer-aided assessment. Earlier than that, there was one about mathematical cognition. But so we're using some sort of established methods here. I should say before I go on, my first love, as it were, is mathematics, and my research agenda primarily focuses around assessment and feedback. So it's the theme I come back to over and over again. And it's the starting point with which I approach this sort of topic in today's agenda, if you like. So we started with a Delphi method. I won't say too much about what I mean by that, but essentially trying to bring together a large number of experts and seeking some kind of a consensus. Here's what I might call a standard protocol in that space, but others might disagree in the interest of time. Let me simply show you what we asked for was, please send us any research question that you think might be important or interesting for the community to look at. We've had a series of stages in that process. There was about 60 or 70 questions we got in that first round, and here's a very early thematic structure to those questions. The reason I highlight this here is something that jumps off the screen at me in the context of the name of the conference we've got today, or Cheat-GPT, is that only one of these boxes is in the name of academic integrity. Of our 60 plus questions, there were 2 questions given to us about academic integrity. That's really important to me insofar as if I go back to a challenge that Bruce set the 3 speakers today about thinking about how important this topic is and how revolutionary it might be, well, how big is the challenge, if you like. I think it's huge and I think it's important, but it's as much a challenge as it is an opportunity, and there are a variety of different ways we might choose to approach this. One of them being, how do we keep our students in line? How do we make sure that we reach our learning objective? How do we make sure that the degrees that we offer our students are as meaningful as they once were? That is not, my agenda is not to say that's not important. My agenda is to say that it's one small part of a much wider puzzle. And that's what this research agenda is telling us. More on that topic another day, because I said I wanted to try and do 2 projects in 5 minutes. So my other one, another project that is currently in progress, this is about trying to generate feedback and trying to assess, again, in the context of undergraduate mathematics using a large language model. The topic that we were looking at here was the notion of proof summary, or the idea that essentially I show my students a mathematical argument and I demand that they give me a summary back. You can make some pedagogical arguments about why that might be a useful enterprise, why that may or may not be something that would support their learning in a variety of different ways. We can also think about it as an assessment tool. Is your ability to summarize somehow connected to your understanding or your comprehension of the task at hand? This connects to a long line of reasoning that we have been looking at for the best part of 10 years now. But this particular project came from an email a colleague of mine sent me saying, Cheat-GPT can do this, which I thought was interesting. And this was as early as GPT-3. In fact, he might have done it with tools earlier than this. But in essence, I can show the computer 2 summaries and ask it which one is better. There's a variety of reasons why we might want to do that beyond the scope for today's topic. But it begs a series of interesting questions. So is this ChatGPT only? Can Claude do this? Can Bard do this? Can Copilot do this? Is that important? Is that interesting? Is there something particular about the notion of proof that makes this possible? Is there something particular about the notion of summary that makes this possible? So what is the context? What are the domains in which this is relevant? There are a lot of people in different places looking at, can we use this to assess for a variety of different reasons, including can we produce useful feedback? My excitement in this space, let me skip a couple of slides, I will come back, is that we have been doing this work for some time now. And one of the questions we might ask ourselves is, do we really need the human judges, and can we connect our human judges to what GPT might be doing in this space? There are all kinds of ethical questions that raises. There are all kinds of conversations that I hope we might have over the next half hour about sort of what are the consequences of that observation. But the raw observation is, at least in this particular space that does have a history of scholarship and a sort of established methodology around it, in essence, we can, at least in this very particular context, we can pull out the human element here. So what do I mean by the context I'm talking about? So here are a couple of summaries that I've asked my students to produce. These are completely arbitrary. They're just an exemplar of the kinds of things we might be looking at. And I ask the computer, or I ask my human colleague, which one of these two is better? And we can use some statistical algorithms to blah, 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 draw a conclusion about which of these, what the relevant quality of these things are over a larger scale. I can also ask GPT to give me some feedback. I'm not going to go into the weeds here, but broadly speaking, this kind of feedback is useful. It might not be the kind of thing I would write, might not be the kind of thing that you would write, but it's accurate, it's technically robust. It required no training at all. All I did was ask it which is better and tell me why. And here's what it produced. Again, we're not mathematicians here. Our goal is not to think about the mathematics. So I'm going to glaze over all of this. But again, here's one where I asked for particular feedback just for one summary. This was the one that was on the right on my slide earlier. So this is just simply a narrative text here. It's about 100 words long, slightly less. Notice that now what we're being asked for is a series of, well, what the computer is suggesting here is that we provide some more technical detail. All of this technical detail is accurate. For anyone who does have a mathematical background, this is Cantor's diagonalization argument for the open unit interval. If that means nothing to you, don't lose sleep over it, it's not important. But so in my last 30 seconds, a couple of things to say. So we can now compare our judgments here to the judgments made by humans on our old paper. And broadly speaking, this is all robust. We can look into the weeds here. There's all kinds of things we might want to ask ourselves. But the very short answer to the open question, can GPT-4 do this? Notice I've upgraded to 4 here, not 3, is yes, this does work, at least in this context. So I'll end with a couple of sort of open research questions. We have a project in mind that we will address these questions on. Ignore research question 1. It's not particularly urgent for today's topic. But research questions 2 and 3 are where I spend my time, in particular thinking about research question 3. What is the formative potential of an assessment like this, and how can we use it not just as an assessment opportunity, but also a learning opportunity? And we do have a project that is currently underway. Here's what that looks like. I would love to discuss it with you at a later date, but I'm already over time, and I'm very grateful for your attention. I look forward to the discussion later on. Back to you, James.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ben. Keeping an eye on the time. I mean, there is always some drift, but there's always some flex. Thank you for that really, really wonderful talk. It's very good to see the issues being broadened out as well, particularly that the issue of assessments, although it's often seen through the lens of text writing from students. This is the current issue that we find ourselves often noticing and being brought to our attention. The role of Gen AI in university assessment goes beyond that, including to the other side, to marking. And I would also, I'm grateful to you for pointing out that Gen AI tools can also be used by students for things beyond academic writing. One thing I noticed myself, for example, is that they can even be used to, analyze and write up statistical analyses in the social sciences, which is itself a brave new world. So thank you very much. At this point then, keeping on the time, I'll hand over to Professor Mingming Chu for the last of our 3 talks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, James. So I'm going to continue with the research, and I'm going to switch around to if students can use generative artificial intelligence, so can teachers. So from the teacher side, I'll talk about how to improve student writing with generative artificial intelligence. This project was done by my postdoc, Jen Wang, my master's students, Alex Morakovsky, and myself. So the general problem we face is that we don't have enough time. Like in a typical course, you might have like hundreds of students' papers to grade. So ideally, we carefully read all of them and assess them, and we identify what are the really great parts that they should keep doing, and then which parts are errors, explain why these are errors or could be done better, and then suggest improvements. And like most of us, teachers don't have that much time. So sometimes we don't correct these errors. Students repeat them over and over again. They tend to fossilize. So we're going to use artificial intelligence to help us solve this problem. We created software called Improve Student Stories. It suggests a correction improvement for each error. It goes beyond spelling and grammar errors. So we have three settings: ISS better, IS simpler, IS dramatic. So let's go through a couple of examples. A student wrote, he used a water gun to shoot some water into his mouth. IS better changed it to he squirted water into his mouth. So it can simplify collocations. Another example, he looking to mirror, he thinks himself good. ISS better changed it to after admiring his reflection in the mirror, he felt satisfied with his appearance. So this is an example of coherently connecting sentences. Let's see if I can move this over. Okay. A third example, he put a glass into a toy and led the toy to read the book. I was like, what the heck is this? But ISS Better actually did a really good job. It rewrote it as he placed a pair of glasses on a toy and pretended it was reading the book too. So here you can see improved the word choice, actually added content to improve the meaning and intention. So on top of that, it also explains what it's doing. So it said the structure and coherence is improved. We need to put each action or event in the correct sequence. I corrected the error, making it more readable and professional. I made it clear and concise. I omitted unneeded details or repetitions for a concise and focused narrative. And I improved the word choice using descriptive vocabulary to help readers engage and grasp the story. So then we did a little study. We applied all three versions on 780 stories by 87 English as foreign language university students. We did linguistic analyses of comatrix, emotions with sentiment analysis, and statistical analysis, multi-level, multivariate outcome analysis. So here's a basic summary statistics. The reading level is about grade 6. The text is moderately complex. The vocabulary was a little bit difficult, but not too much. There weren't that many sentences, only 30 sentences, and there are only 385 words on average. So the basic result is simpler is always more basic and simpler. Better is intermediate, and dramatic is much more complex. And so compared to students, they tend to be more complicated. But the total sentences and total words are fewer. So it's both more complex and shorter. So this tells us that ISS can help teachers give feedback for students. It can correct errors and improve their writing. It can explain the corrections or changes made. And we can have very different ISS tools that can cater to student needs. So we can target student ability and task demands. For novices, we probably want to use ISS simpler. For intermediates, ISS better. And for advanced students, ISS dramatic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ming. That is very, very, it's a wonderful follow-on to Ben's as well, where it was much more of a focus on the role of Gen AI tools in the assessment side for those engaged in the teaching, the delivery of assessment in higher education. And not just the students who produce the material. I know as you were talking, I was reflecting about a comment that Matt made earlier about the world that our students are moving into afterwards, and how not just they may use these tools in generating text, but they may gain feedback from colleagues as well that are also based on Gen AI. Colleagues in the future may be reading each other's work with this, which ends up being quite an interesting thought. You could have people co-writing with Gen AI and then having that commented upon in a co-commenting process from other colleagues. It reminds me of something called extended cognition from psychology, about how we use tools to extend our capabilities. With that said, those are three wonderful, wonderful talks, and I'm grateful to all of our presenters today. We now move on to the next part of our talk. I'll briefly pop up the slides so we can all see where we are. And we're now moving on to breakout rooms, and I'll ask Kelly to help us do that in a minute. And when you're in these breakout rooms, you'll be with 1 to 2 other people. And I would ask you to talk to your roommate towards brainstorming questions that you might submit to the open discussion we have afterwards. And we have 10 minutes to do that. So with that said, Kelly, would you be so kind to help get folks moving into breakout rooms? Thank you. So I will say hello to everyone as we start to close the breakout rooms. I hope you found that useful to be in a smaller space where you could talk with 1 to a few other people, and that you've had a good brainstorming session. You've thought about how the issues of the talks apply to you and apply to your own engagement in university assessment, one way or another, and that from that you've come with some really good questions for us. There is a functionality within Zoom for questions and answers to be submitted. There is a button on the bottom of your screen which should say Q&A, and there should be a question mark within a rectangle. If you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, a pop-up should appear, and there should be a Q&A option within that. If folks would be so kind as to submit any questions they'd like to ask any of the presenters or the hosts, please do start. We'll see about asking them as we go, answering them as we go. I will happily ask some questions more broadly on this topic whilst people are typing questions. I wondered regarding whether we could invert the issue somewhat and consider what ethical uses of AI there may be, which is kind of like Cheat-GPT inverted in a way. And some thoughts towards that are the use of Gen AI towards advancing equity and accessibility in assessment as well, for students with, towards inclusion in the context of special educational needs, for example, as well as for students engaging in higher education in a second language.
So should we just start answering the questions?
Yes, I have got if you can see the questions, I've got the chat window up. I'm sharing a window at the moment, which I could stop sharing, but I think it somewhat prevents me. So you should have the ability to publish some of the questions as well, to bring them into the public and generate answers for them to foster the discourse.
We can just share this, screen. For instance, right now I can see all these questions like from the participants. Oops, are you seeing the
We
Yes,
currently see your emails.
well, for a moment we could see the questions there.
so
They've gone
now
again.
okay, I'll reshare it because I didn't think.
Yeah, let me just read CC's question. So CC says, thank you for a very good presentation. I would like to ask presenters for ideas on how to conceptualize AI literacy for students and how to measure it. So this is kind of like asking how can you measure computer literacy? And it's just as broad in terms of its capabilities. And so you could use generative RA, artificial intelligence, to identify all 200 plus million proteins in the human body, which AlphaGo got a Nobel Prize for. You could get to do simple calculations. So I think there isn't like a single answer to AI literacy, just like there isn't a single answer to how to use computers. There's some general techniques that are useful, understanding how it works and how it doesn't work. So first thing is generative artificial intelligence actually isn't intelligent in the human sense of the word. It combines words together and it makes guesses. It's always hallucinating. And sometimes hallucinations are really excellent. So I think that's like, there's some basic ideas that we need to understand how it works and then how to use it. This is also connecting to Bruce's question about how much of a threat it is. It can radically change, like the way we do anything. Like the protein is just one example of it. Terrorists are using it. So it can do lots of different things and could do some of it quite well, and also could do some things really badly. So even though ChatGPT can do a lot of things like writing, for instance, we still need to have expert judgment to figure out how to use things. I don't know if Cece, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just curious about so if the technology of AI is developing very fast and we don't know what will happen tomorrow. So the question that we developed today to measure AI literacy will be not useful again for tomorrow's education setting.
Yes,
Is it
that's
correct?
very likely true. Yes.
So the measurement will be continuously developing and we are never catch up the newest technology. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so let me give a quick example, like prompt engineering, like how to design prompts. That's really important now, but it probably won't be in a decade or so because the AI will advance beyond that.
There's an interesting question. Oh, sorry. I was going to say there's an interesting question from Stephen White, which is about the main change in student assignments is the quality of language has improved. And that is something that I have seen. And the question is, does this mean the language and communication criteria for our assessments needs to be changed with a minimum expectation that quality is very high? That is one of the things that I've been wondering about. At the moment, our assessment criteria specifically rewards, not as a main marking point, but it specifically rewards the quality of the written English. So a bit of spelling, punctuation, and grammar, mostly about kind of clear and accurate writing. And my personal feeling is that since everybody can now write accurate and clear English by using generative AI tools, that probably, yes, we should expect that as a minimum. But if we're going to do that, then we obviously need to allow students to use generative AI to support them to do that. But it does raise another question, which is, well, if we say, well, everybody can do it like that, does that mean that people that are coming through and beginning their academic careers will actually never learn to do it for themselves because they don't need to? And is that a problem? And that goes back to the calculator question that Bruce raised at the beginning. I mean, I don't need to know how to use a slide rule or a log table because I am quite old, but I'm not quite old enough to have had to use those. And it's not a problem. It hasn't held me back in my maths. But does it hold us back if we don't actually learn clear and accurate English? Does it mean we can't recognize it? I don't know.
I think it is very interesting, and then also I think it is connecting to Alice's comment about like, should we really expect that everyone is using it? And if that is the case, it seems it is becoming the case. And if so, I wonder whether, like from the university's point of view, in terms of equality and diversity, etc., I wonder we really kind of have to offer free, like a ChatGPT or any other Gen AI app, so that the students who are not, like who doesn't know about this or who can't afford the app, then should we really like offer to at least like give a simpler version? That's my question. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, to follow up on that, there's gonna be a great danger of inequality. So if you're in a rich country or you're like next door to Google, you might have access to the latest like general artificial intelligence. Whereas let's say you're in Zimbabwe, you probably won't have the same access. So there's a great deal of potential inequality. And the latest versions are much better than even the version last year. So this is a big threat.
This is true, isn't it? But there's already inequality in access to library resources, for instance. That inequality exists in lots of other ways, doesn't it? It might even be that the relative costs of what we do at the moment that is unequal. Actually, the relative costs of generative AI tools won't be as big, and it might become less of a problem. But I don't know.
I think there's a really interesting topic here that cuts across a few. So sorry. It cuts across a couple of the questions that have been asked. That is around an invitation to re-examine learning objectives, and I think I'm very hesitant about metaphors connected to the calculator, and there's a couple of really interesting thought pieces out there if you want to go find them about the explorations of different metaphors that can and can't be useful here. But so it's been brought up a couple of times. So to discuss the calculator, there was a big outrage and a big conversation around, well, all of a sudden basic arithmetic becomes irrelevant, and we don't need our students to learn to do basic arithmetic. It didn't take us long for us to figure out that that was, broadly speaking, nonsense, at least in the mathematics education community. We have really good reasons for wanting foundational knowledge, not necessarily for its own sake, but because of what we might be able to build on top of it. So the slide rule may or may not have been considered, or log tables may or may not have been considered foundational in a way that we had let them go. But we have now reintroduced arithmetic skills, not because we assert that anyone may or may not want them. Everybody is going to need them to some extent, perhaps not as far as others. But if we're building some sort of logical chain here, or we're building a pyramid of knowledge, if you like, then that is the foundational text. So I think we then go back to the question of, in your discipline, what is your foundational knowledge? What do you need? What do you not need? And then just, I guess, because I'm an assessment dork, and this is where I spend my time thinking, how are we going to target those learning objectives? How are we going to draw students' attention to what it is that we really want them focusing on, perhaps without the sort of ancillary stuff? I remember as a computer science undergraduate that we took a handwritten coding test, and I would never forget how insane that felt to me. That I lost a couple of marks in a university exam because I forgot to put the semicolon on the end of the Java text. Now, that's not a mistake that is possible to make, insofar as I make that mistake all the time, but no big deal. I get a compiler error, I stick my semicolon in, nothing gained, nothing lost. But so I think these are the conversations we need to be having, and they're very discipline-specific conversations about what it is that we want to be learning and how are we going to target students' attention there. I'm hoping that's where both universities, but also discipline-specific educators and researchers will be investing their time. But anyway, that's my two penny worth. That doesn't answer all the questions in this chat, but I think it speaks to more than a few of them.
Yeah, I think that speaks to how we need change assessments. If we're just asking people to write an essay, that's going to be very problematic if ChatGPT can do it so well. And there's also detection tools, which several people have asked about. They're okay, but they're not that great. So one example is you can try to see if ChatGPT differs from humans in some way. For instance, does it use the letter E more often? And so that's something you could check, and humans would be hard pressed to find it. But it's not great. And even the people who developed, for instance, Turnitin, he was telling me that it's about 80% accurate, which is not bad, but you don't want to expel a student for something that's 80% accurate.
I think it is really interesting, and Jacob's comment on, is it time for us to treat Gen AI as a friend rather than enemy, and something to control? That really totally makes sense. I was quite surprised when I talked with Daniel from Education University, and hearing that the Education University is already using education Cheat-GPT as part of the system, and then teachers are generating questions with the all these materials, etc. So it seems, yes, it is really a different approach from Southampton University, because we are kind of trying to prevent it. We want to be cautious about adopting it, whereas Education University is already taking it and then using it daily. And for that, I have this question, Gen AI apps are after all, they are commercial, like a commodity, and obviously we can't prevent it entering the education scene anymore. But then are we, I don't know, are we being too much sucked into this commercial activity, obviously we can't live without those, but yes, I think that is really an interesting position, like a positional difference between the two institutes.
Yeah, I think potential is so great that, it could really improve things a lot. So I know one of my friends who's a lecturer, she asked ChatGPT to take her lecture notes and turn to a song, and she sang it in class. And so that might be a standard. We're not going to lecture anymore. We have to sing songs.
Okay, folks, that natural pause to the conversation. I am noting it's it's now 1 minute past 11, and have no doubt that we could keep talking for another half hour, another hour, etc. But it is a flash conference, and there is an opportunity to segue into the second aim of today, and that is for this conference to encourage new interinstitutional collaborations and discussions. And then that leads us to moving forwards. What can we take forwards from today? Broadly, swiftly, the huge issue that is affecting one of the core pillars of higher education as conceived in the world, really, in the global understanding of what higher education is. It's rapidly evolving. Any discussions that or any kind of understandings now risk being outdated within 6 to 12 months. Therefore, it poses huge challenges for our continuing professional development as academics, the skills, the preparedness that we put into our students, and we need to remain nimble-footed and agile as we progress in here. I think those are very broad themes, the breadth, depth, and rapidity of what's going on. There may be others. I don't have the full time to do a thematic analyses. I suppose I should have brought a Gen AI tool with me to do that live, but we're not quite there yet. Thank goodness. Moving forward then, if folks who are attending are interested in exploring potential opportunities for follow-up activities here, be that in research or in university teaching or in university assessment, please do email any one of the hosts today, and we will try to bring people together to have and to facilitate follow-up discussions on any of these topics. It would be absolutely our pleasure, and I don't mind speaking for all three of us in saying that it's one of the aims of today and one of the aims of our two universities coming together in continued collaboration. And with that, then, I will say thank you to everyone for attending today. I hope you give yourself a good round of applause. Thank you for all the contributions. And I'd especially like to thank our EDU HK technical team of Kelly and Seeming for that absolutely sterling work in getting today running. It would not have been possible without their huge assistance. So I'm very grateful to them. And if anyone else is planning on running a Flash conference, you will need a technical team with that level of skill, I suggest as well. So Tahi, Mingming, if you have anything else you'd like to say, please do take the time to do so now. Otherwise, we'll draw things to a
No,
close.
it's just I'm really happy that this first conference worked out really fantastically, and then for all the people involved and the participants, hope we will continue our discussion, and then some of the further collaboration, research, project, writing, etc. will arise again. Thank you.
Totally agree.
Thank you so much. Okay then, folks, enjoy your evenings and or work days, and we'll look forward to catching up with you in due course. Thank you so much.